Welcome to the Week 4 recap and Week 5 preview video. We are officially more than halfway through the regular season, so let's see how our competitors did this week. Game 1 of this week was in the Bloodstone division. We had Dr. Spectre against Fur. Dr. Spectre looking to go into first place, Fur looking to be fighting for a playoff spot. Game 1 was erratic deck White Stake, and Doc was able to get that almighty glass build online with loads of jacks available. We found Bloodstone. We had Ancient actually line up with the Bloodstone for the final hand, and Doc put up a massive number to take down Fur. Moving on to game 2, we moved up to Black Stake, this time on Ghost deck, and this time it would be the Kings that would be winning for Doc. Despite having a Baron, we're seeing a little bit of a Belenos Bear hybrid hand here to win the game for Dr. Spectre, playing the glass with the Bloodstone with the Chad, but also still having the Baron to give ×5 mult between the two Red Seal Kings left in hand to once again force move on to game 3, leading 2-0 for Doc. Then we move to Yellow deck Gold Stake, and this one ended a little bit quicker than the previous two. Fur did find a Baron and a photo that Doc didn't at this point in the game, but Doc did such a great job with deck manipulation and glass cards, they were able to pull off the victory, and Doc takes it 3-0. The second match of week 4 was also in the Bloodstone division. We had Malf versus Edzy, which was a banger of a match last year, and this year delivered once again. We got painted deck Gold Stake for game 1, and Malf was actually able to find a negative Vagabond that made all the difference. The deck manipulation led to glass cards, led to a glass on that Red Seal 9, and Malf was able to take it away from Edzy. So we moved on to game 2, which we knew there was going to be Gold Stakes throughout this game with Edzy and Malf playing. This time it was on Ghost deck, and this time Edzy found the Double Dusk photo combination. Those are the only 3 jokers Edzy needed with all Red Seal glass queens. Even had a Justice in hand to boot at the end there with 4 lives remaining, and was able to beat Malf, who was also playing with Vagabond in this game. Moving on to game 3, we went to Plasma deck. We went full chaos mode on Malf's side of things. However, Malf was unable to get the chips going like Edzy was, and Edzy was able to rush down a chip build, not allow Malf the time to get the glass build online, and was able to just win it like that. If this game had even gone one ante longer, I think Malf would start to pull ahead with that X-Mult, but it did not happen, so Edzy takes this match 2-1. The next match was my match against Rarran in the Onyx division. We were separated by 1 point entering the game. Game 1 would be played on Ghost deck White Stake, my least favorite deck. However, I was able to make it work with 5 Red Seal glass jacks in the end. However, Rarran had a very similar build. The only difference was actually the Bean Mime play that I had on my end. I found that negative Mime by rolling quite a bit deeper than Rarran was able to due to a little bit more economic generation. Game 2, Black Stake Ghost deck. Once again on this dreaded Ghost deck for me, but I was able to make the Photo, Sock, Dusk, Red Seal glass come together and work, and I was able to actually take this one with 3 lives remaining over Rarran's build, which was solely reliant on the glass without that photo. And then the final game, I was down 4 lives to 1. However, I slowly brought it back with Idol, Dusk, Photo, and Bloodstone. Also a Red Seal that I actually found in the very first shop that Rarran was unable to find, and this was going to clinch the 3-0 and put me in first place in the Onyx division. The fourth match of the week had been in Nandre facing off in Bloodstone division. We had erratic deck White Stake for game 1, with Bean getting the first choice and moving it to that lower White Stake. A double Blueprint Idol build is what Bean ended up on with only 2 lives remaining. Had that negative Drunkard to assure that they got the cards that they needed. And Nandre was actually running the double Baron build with a Bean. It was, much closer than we thought it was going to be. Nandre just didn't really get their draws on that final PvP. But going into game 2, this one was a lot cleaner from Bean. 4 lives remaining when they finished off Nandre with 4 glass queens and the family in Dusk to boot. Nandre unable to really put up much points there. But in the final game, Nandre was able to salvage a point here with a Mime Baron build alongside a Photo Chad build. It was really interesting to see on the painted deck. It really worked, and Bean was unable to overcome this with Shoot the Moon and the Hit the Road Jack to go alongside the Mime and Baron, and Nandre with 1 life remaining was able to get that point. Our next match was another Onyx Division face-off as Halion in a playoff spot was looking to improve upon their record, and Nito was looking to get their first points of the season. Game 1, we went to Gold Stake on yellow deck, and this Gold Stake choice seemingly biting Halion in the butt a tiny bit as they're unable to get out of a small blind, and they ended up losing the match to Nito, who, to Nito's credit, was absolutely kind of dominating the PvPs, hence why Halion wasn't even able to get out of a blind. Game 2, we went to Black Stake, Nito's choice, and then Erratic deck, which was Halion's choice, and Nito once again coming out on top with a Bloodstone, Dusk, Chad, Photo, and Oops build. Oops is always hard to work into these builds with Bloodstone because it's going to break your glass cards, but it does make Bloodstone so much better, and Nito made it work. They were able to 4x the score of Halion with a very similar build due to a Eternal Lucky Cat that Halion dedicated themselves to. So that Black Stake choice by Nito really coming to fruition and working out in her favor. And then finally, we had another Bloodstone build, but this time, the difference on Abandoned deck White Stake between Halion and Nito was actually a Kanyo that Nito dedicated herself to, despite it being Abandoned deck, gained it to 7x, and was able to beat Halion by just a ×2 when it was all said and done with 1 life remaining. And Nito completed the 3-0 sweep, gets herself right back into the playoff conversation in the Onyx Division. We moved on to our featured match of the week. On Tuesday, at least, we had Balatro versus Roffle. If either one of these players could 3-0, they would move to a tie for first place with me in the division, but more importantly, kind of fighting it out here to secure a playoff spot. And in Game 1, despite Bear losing connection to our overlay in the very last moment, Bear was unable to overcome a double Chad, double Photo, Blueprint Brainstorm build by Roffle. I mean, this is the ultimate look inside build we had here for Roffle, and Roffle would put up E14 with said build. And while Bear did have a Blueprint and 2 photos, it was unable to compete with the just massive amount of points being scored by Roffle. Game 2 went to Checkered deck Gold Stake, and once again we find Roffle losing their Gold Stake choice against another opponent, and Balatro coming out on top. Despite the double dice we had on Roffle's side, of course, that double dice is hard to make work with glass cards, but they were trying to make it work with Luckies. Game 3, we moved on to Black Stake Abandoned deck. So Roffle kind of moving off away from that Gold Stake. Both of our players had Ancient Joker, but Balatro had 2 hacks while Roffle had a Blueprint, and the Blueprint ended up being much more valuable, being able to copy the Ancient versus gain 2 extra re-triggers with hack. This game could have been a little bit closer if maybe Balatro found some more glasses to be re-triggering with those hacks and the Ancient, but in the end, Roffle's Red Seal glass build and the Blueprint Ancient was enough to put them over the edge with that E12 score, and Roffle would take this 2-1. Our penultimate match of the week was Scooty versus C-Dubs, and I did have the privilege of casting this one as well. Game 1 went to White Stake on green deck, and despite the best efforts of Scooty to make this work with Stencil and Glass Joker, with both of these competitors down to 1 life, the Bloodstone Photo and finally an idle hit for C-Dubs was enough to bring out the victory for C-Dubs in this one, and we moved on to Game 2, which Scooty took it to Gold Stake. C-Dubs wanted Erratic deck, and in the end, it was the deck manipulation. Very similar Joker setup up top. However, the 3 glass cards for C-Dubs that they actually got from a Mega Arcana skip tag, not from in the shop, was able to make the difference in this game. Those Mega Arcana skip tags gave C-Dubs the Justice, the Death, and the Fool to do all of that. And then in the final game, despite a double Bloodstone from Scooty on White Stake Ghost deck, they were unable to find the 5th king to make it a close final score. And C-Dubs, after only scoring a couple points last season, is currently in 4th place in the Bloodstone division, comes away with the 3-0 sweep and is looking at a playoff berth if things continue this way. The final game of the week was the featured Friday match in the Onyx division. We had Gothic versus Justin. In game 1, we had Plasma deck on White Stake. And Justin was starting to kind of make that transition to Exmol and couldn't really decide if they should stay on chips or stay on the Exmol. And that ended up costing Justin here, where Gothic Lord UK was able to score a metric ton of points with a Photo Seltzer Chad Blueprint Brainstorm build. However, Justin actually was going to be able to make it, at least relatively close for the fantasy scores if they could have kept going in that Exmol direction. We moved on to game 2. We had Orange Stake, an interesting choice always by Gothic, and Ghost Deck. And this time, Justin was just unable to get out of the blinds, unable to really find a build to get going despite the polychrome photo. Both of these players were kind of struggling on this stake, barely getting by on many of the blinds, trying to get value out of things like the 8-ball. Final game, we once again had the Plasma deck. We once again had it on White Stake. And this time, Justin once again felt like they built a little too deep into the chip side of things, which cost them in the end once the Exmol became more important. We did have a polychrome photo for both these players at one point, but Justin sold theirs for chips, and Gothic keeping their photo was the difference in this game, plus a couple of glass cards, able to get that Exmol rolling, and that Exmol turns into a massive score of 66 million, and Gothic walks away with the 3-0 victory. Checking out our standings after week 4, we have the Onyx division, where I am in first place with 13. Roffle trails me by a point at 12. Balatro Spirit in third place with 11. And then we have a 3-way tie for that final spot in the Onyx division playoffs. We have Gothic, Rarran, and Halion all at 8 points. Nito gained their first points up on the board this week. 4 points is one sweep away from getting themselves right back in that conversation. Justin still sitting at the bottom. Bloodstone, we have a 2-way tie at the top with Dr. Spectre and Bean. Of course, Bean has the head-to-head tiebreaker right now, so Bean is atop the division. C-Dubs and Edsy, both at 10 points, and that kind of rounds out your playoff spots. Currently, Mouth and Scooty at 7 and 5 respectively, chasing those playoff spots from Edsy and C-Dubs, and then Nandre and Fur both tied towards the bottom at 4 points, but still plenty of games left to play to get themselves into a playoff spot. This week, this is your schedule for Major League Balatro. We got Balatro Spirit versus Gothic Lord UK in the Onyx division on Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Then we have a morning game, Tuesday, September 16th. We got HC Justin versus Rarran at 11 a.m. Eastern. Our first featured match of the week, we got C-Dubs versus Dr. Spectre in the Bloodstone division. That will be casted on my channel. 3 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, you got Edsy versus Scooty, and then Mouth versus Nandre at 4 p.m. Eastern. I will try to cast that match between Mouth and Nandre. Thursday, we have myself versus Nito. You're not going to want to miss that one at 6 p.m. Eastern. And then Friday, we got a double header. The first one, Roffle versus Halion at 3 p.m. Eastern, and then Bean versus Fur at 6 p.m. Eastern. Both those games will be casted. Looking forward to it. Here is your Fantasy Major League Balatro update. Week 4, we had a tie for the top with Lee and Winnie, both Major League Balatro staff members who actually help out getting everything together behind the scenes. They actually had the same exact team this week and both come out on top. Both of them have already claimed their hats. And we look at the overall leaderboard for the season. And currently Sal Paradise in first with 1,419 points. And Mr. Bean Fan and Kozak both have been towards the top this whole season, coming in at second and third. Now, to talk about the price changes for week 5. Myself, I've moved from $5 to $6. Roffle has been moved down from $6 to $5. Rarran has also moved from $5 to $4, and Edsy has been bumped up from the $4 tier to the $5 tier. Next movement, we have Gothic moving from $3 to $4, Mouth moving down from 4 to 3, and then Nito and Nandre switching places. Nito moving up from $2 to $3, and Nandre moving down from $3 to 2. I actually think this week, due to how the prices came out, just due to fantasy points, Nandre is a fantastic grab, and I will be taking him at that $2 price point. I also am loading up my team with Rarran, Halion and myself. A little bit of a risk to take Halion against Roffle, but I do expect extraordinarily high scores. I think Rarran's going to do very well this week. I'm mad at myself for not taking myself last week, putting up the huge amount of points against Rarran, so I'm not going to make that mistake again. And having Andre in that $2 tier is actually allowing me to make that play on myself. So anyway, some fun fantasy little introspection there, and now let's jump into the previews for week 5. Alright, so the first game to preview is Balatro Bear versus Gothic Lord UK. And this game was a pretty close one last year when the two faced off in the Onyx division. Balatro Bear, though, I think has been on another level, not just in Major League Balatro, but in Balatro in general. This past year, they have been one of the best Balatro players in the world. So I think Gothic Lord, in that sense, has their work cut out for them. But where I do see a huge advantage for Gothic Lord is taking people those weird stakes, orange, purple. And it sounds silly because it's like, well, if you can play gold stakes, can't you obviously play those other ones? But you have to remember, in Major League Balatro, in multiplayer Balatro, it's all about getting that huge score in the PvP. And the way you min-max to that huge score is different on every single stake, how much you can get away with in the blinds. So on gold stake, it's actually a little bit less than it is on orange stake. And finding that perfect balance takes practice, and it's something Gothic has been practicing. So I do think Gothic is a sneaky play here, maybe for fantasy or just, for winning this game. Despite having less points than Bear in the division, maybe being looked upon as an underdog coming into this game due to the stake matchups. I really do think Gothic thrives on, purple, blue, orange stakes, and I could see them taking a couple of games here. Meanwhile, Bear, I think, will just want to take it to white stake, and on those white stakes, Bear's been so good at min-maxing, although we have mentioned that sometimes Bear can get into a hybrid build where they're caught a little bit between two minds, so that's something to always watch out for. It's something I kind of always talk about when maybe critiquing Bear's gameplay. This should be a very exciting matchup. I do think this is going to be one of the more strategic games of the week, and a lot of it is going to come down to that deck and stake selection. What does Bear choose as a deck if Gothic does go orange? What deck does Gothic take to it on white stake? Is it something like black to make it as difficult as possible? The next match is HC Justin versus Rarran. And Justin, I feel like, has been on the cusp of really putting it all together for a couple wins every single week now. And to be fair to Justin, Gothic really toyed with the deck and stake choices. We had a tough stake choice in orange stake, and then the deck choice being Plasma on Gothic's side just really threw off Justin, who did not have, admittedly, a lot of practice on Plasma deck. And it seemed like in the second version of Plasma, they realized, hey, I really needed to build in the chips early, but they didn't know when to switch off to the Exmo. With all that said, I do think Rarran's going to keep it kind of simple. Rarran thrives on the, ghost deck, white stake type gameplay. And on this gameplay, I think Justin has a real shot of pulling off the upset if they dedicate themselves to the deck manipulation, to the glass cards, to fully understanding the power of re-triggering Exmo. I do think Justin can definitely come away with a victory here, and that's no shot at Rarran, who is extremely good in themselves, but I actually think this kind of more straightforward gameplay, something that's been more practiced by Justin, is where they have their best chance against Rarran. And it's going to be a question, does Rarran actually take themselves off what they're comfortable with to put Justin also a little bit more into a bind with the decision making? Should be an interesting one on Tuesday morning. The third match of the week, C-Dubs versus Dr. Spectre. And C-Dubs has been playing phenomenal this season, and I'm sure is going to continue on the white stake choices. Now, is Dr. Spectre finally going to give us a Zodiac deck pick? The people have been clamoring for it, but I do think this game is not going to come down to the deck and stake choices. I think we may see it pretty straightforward on white stake, some pretty straightforward decks like a Zodiac or something like that. What this is going to come down to is, can C-Dubs match Dr. Spectre in terms of deck manipulation, in terms of economy? Or is C-Dubs admit defeat in that department and try and rush down Dr. Spectre? Do they try and just win the first 4 PvPs? If they were trying to do that, I almost feel like gold stake is the better option, but Doc is so good at fighting that off on the higher stakes, and C-Dubs has gotten almost all their points off of the lower stake difficulties. So where does this game go? And it's not like C-Dubs can't play the higher stakes, but and we saw it against Scooty, but I really do think C-Dubs has found his comfort zone in min-maxing on those lower stakes. There's not much insight I can provide. I do think Doc is very formidable. I think this is going to be a really tough game and a tough test for C-Dubs. But C-Dubs has just consistently shown up every single week in Major League Balatro so far and coming away with the victories. Knowing when they have to take a chance, like we saw in that Scooty game where the Mega Arcana skip was the difference maker because they felt that they were behind. They weren't going to generate economy. So really, they had to take a Hail Mary, and the Hail Mary paid off. And that kind of situational awareness in the game can lead just to a few more wins because it's not always going to pay off. But when you have to do something and you know you have to do something, being able to execute that decision is very important. Next, Edzy Scooty, 3 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. I'm really looking forward to this one. This one's going to be a gold stake feast. We know that. I think the decks are going to be pretty straightforward. Stuff like yellow deck, ghost deck, checkered deck. I think both these players played very well on both that deck and stake combo. And Scooty got, again, a little bit unlucky. We just got done talking about C-Dubs getting lucky with the Mega Arcana skip. Otherwise, Scooty definitely takes that match. And I think it's going to be the same here. The difference is I think in this game, basically anyone compared to Edzy is an agent of chaos. But we've seen Scooty time and time again pull out the Took maneuver, the mouth, as we call it, by just skipping for those interesting tags to try and create divergence in the seed, especially in gold stake. And Scooty's been really unlucky with those skips versus I feel like C-Dubs or a mouth has gotten a little bit of luck. Let's just call it what it is. But I don't think that's going to deter Scooty from knowing when they want to take that shot at divergence. And I think it could really pay off in this game against Edzy if they just, flip that coin and it lands on the right side for them when it comes to taking those skips. So when you're watching this game, watch out for that. Watch out for when Scooty decides to skip and if that skip works out for them. Because I think that at the end of the day could be the difference maker Scooty needs to come away with a game victory or a match victory in this one against Edzy. We got Malf versus Nandre. I am so excited to cast this match. Nandre and Malf are just hilarious when they get together. When they got together last year, we know this is probably going to be played on the higher stake difficulty, and we know we're probably playing some plasma deck. And Malf really has been holding their own so far. I think maybe even unlucky to have not more points in this league. They've been really playing well, picking out their skips with a little bit more caution, a little bit more strategy behind them, not just going crazy with the skips just to do so, but doing so at times where it really can give them the advantage. Nandre, on the other hand, I feel like has consistently been playing kind of the rushdown method, going for points early and fast. And that's worked out in some cases, not worked out in other cases, but I think these two are just so evenly matched, despite having such differentiating kind of outlooks on the game. I don't think Malf is usually going for that rushdown method unless they're playing someone like a Doc. I think they're really trying to play as well as they can throughout, but taking those little skips, while Nandre is just going to be points. Can Nandre take the first 4 PvPs? Do those skips end up really hurting Malf by not filling out the Joker spots, doing deck manipulation early when Nandre is going for set points? Do we not see plasma deck? Do we see Nandre kind of do something else? Maybe even picks white stake against Malf because Malf is just so used to this harder difficulty. They haven't practiced as much min-maxing deck manipulation on the lower stake difficulties. I think there's going to be a lot of intriguing choices in this one. I think this one sneakily is maybe your game of the week just because it's going to be, first of all, hilarious between the two, as I've already mentioned. But I actually think the gameplay choices are really interesting when Nandre and Malf line up. For the 5th game of the week, or 6th game of the week, we have myself versus Nito, Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern. Nito just put up their first points of the year, sweeping Halion, and I think Nito's going to be coming into this game with a lot of confidence. She played the game phenomenally against Halion. Last year, I did sweep Nito, and I'm really looking to attempt to try and do it again because I would love to keep my first place spot in the Onyx division. I think, coming in first or second and avoiding the round 1 matchup against what may very well be Dr. Spectre or Bean in the Bloodstone division would be kind of beneficial. I'm not going to lie. I would love to not have to play one of those two in my first playoff game if I make playoffs. You know, there's a lot of ifs in all this because I'm assuming that they may come at the top of the Bloodstone division. But I digress from that point. Talking about this game, I think Nito really loves Black Stake, and that's lucky for me. I think I actually match up really well against Nito, who I think has been consistently underrated by the chatters, by the commenters in this game. But with that said, she excels on Black Stake, and that is a stake I have a ton of practice on, at least with ranked multiplayer, but even a little bit in Major League Balatro. So I just think generally I match up pretty well against Nito. I do think the Black Stake games are going to be extremely close. I think when it's my turn to choose a stake, I go to one extreme. I just don't know which extreme I'm going to choose yet. I think I either go white stake or I go purple stake. Not quite to gold. I don't want to deal with the rental with the perishable tags, but I do love the higher scoring requirements. I feel that can put a lot of pressure onto Nito's gameplay and also losing that discard as well. But I do think very entertaining. I have no idea the decks that we're going to play in this one. Last year it was abandoned twice, and Nito and I both love abandoned decks, so I think we're both fine with that. So outside of abandoned, I have no idea, but I do feel like we're going to get at least one abandoned game in this matchup, so looking forward to it. The penultimate game of Week 5 in the first featured match of Friday, Roffle versus Halion. This one is going to be a barn burner. I do think Halion has been playing a lot more gold stake this season and has been excelling on it. And funny enough, when Roffle's had close games, such as the one against Bear, the one against Rarran, the matches that Roffle actually, the games that Roffle dropped in those matches were the gold stake, were Roffle's choice. So I think we may see some reverse psychology. Like going into this season, you would 100% expect Roffle's going to choose the gold stake, Halion's choosing the white stake, Roffle's choosing ghost deck, Halion's choosing something like abandoned deck. I think the script has somehow, over the course of this season, been completely flipped, where Roffle, I think, may choose black or white stake, and Halion is the one taking it to gold stake. It's just funny how those things work out. I don't think Roffle's scared of playing those gold stakes. I just think that Roffle's seen a little bit more success keeping the temperature a little bit down due to just the incredible ability of Roffle to min-max. Halion is one of the best deck manipulators in this game, however. Very good at getting the cards in that deck into a very good spot. Just has to work maybe on the Joker decision, on the economic decisions a tad bit more. And that's something to watch out in this game. I think if Halion controls the economy well, Halion's actually in a very good position to bounce back from the sweep last week and put up some points on the board. And again, watch out for the deck and stake choices. I'm making this assumption, I'm making this guess. That's what I think could happen. In reality, it could go any which way. So I think it's going to be fun to see how that plays out. And it's really going to dictate how these two play the game. In the final game of the week, Bloodstone Division, we got Bean, our first place player, against Fur, who's currently at the bottom of the standings. However, something I said probably last week about Fur, we heard Doc say it about Fur, and it's just, Fur is new to Major League Balatro, but I do not think there's been a better player throughout this entire competition at calling out exactly what the opponent has. Fur already has such a deep understanding of what the opponent must have done and where the divergence came in the seed to be putting up the scores that the opponent is putting up. It is like they are watching the other person's stream, and that's not me accusing me. I know Fur is not watching the other person's stream. It has just been an uncanny ability and understanding of multiplayer Balatro that honestly I still don't even feel I have, and that is scary as Fur develops the skills to be making those same plays as their opponent when their opponent is in the lead. Like if Fur is understanding what the divergence is, that means next time they know kind of the correct plays to make sure they're on the more efficient path. And I think Fur is just getting better and better, and I do think Fur is a great upset choice, maybe even a good fantasy pick this week against Bean. Bean is fantastic. We all know maybe the most scary player to play in this league with all the multiplayer experience. 3-0'd Edsy, 3-0 Doc. But I think Fur is going to take it to slightly higher difficulties against Bean. They've been studying And I do think Fur continues to put it all together. Yes, they got 3-0'd by Doc this week, but once again, Fur seemingly knew what the issue was, what they had to do different, what Doc was doing as they were doing it. And I just have to give credit to Fur for picking up this game so quickly. And it's no surprise, Fur, fantastic gamer, very smart. And just in general, I think Fur is going to develop into one of the best players in this league, and I'm curious to see when that week kind of comes where Fur just explodes onto the scene and 3-0 someone like a beam, and everyone's like, okay, Fur's the real deal. They're starting to really put it together, and it could be this week, but regardless, I think we're gonna have really interesting and fun games between Beam and Fur. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to check out all the games this week. Don't forget to visit mlbalatro.com to find the scheduled standings. You can find information about the league, how it's all set up. You can also find links to YouTube, Blue Sky Fantasy, and the merch all on that website. But there's more links down in the description down below if you need to find anything. And I can't wait to see you. Thank you for supporting Major League Balatro all season. And comment down below, who is your favorite fantasy pick of the week? And we'll see you for your next one very soon.